He stood in the doorway with his suitcase half-zipped, watching me like I was something he'd already decided to throw away. It wasn't the first time we'd fought, but that night, something final hung in the air. "You'll never make it without me," he said. Calm, almost gentle, like he was doing me a favor by saying it out loud. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I'd scream. "You think you're the reason I'm still standing?" I asked. He shrugged. "I know I am." "You don't have the drive, Sam. You've got ideas, but no follow-through. You're a dreamer, not a doer. That's the difference between us." I should have said something sharp, something that would echo in his head later. But I didn't. I just stood there, clutching a mug of cold coffee, staring at the man who'd once promised me everything. He grabbed his jacket, and right before walking out, he turned back, that smug half-smile still on his face. "When you hit rock bottom, don't call me. I'm done saving you." The door slammed, and that sound, that hollow thud, just hung in the apartment like smoke. For a long time, I sat on the couch in silence, my mind replaying the last few months like a movie I didn't want to watch again. All the late nights he said I was wasting time working on my startup idea. All the times he told his friends I was playing business. I'd believed him for a while, too. It's scary how easy it is to let someone else define what you're capable of. When I finally stood up, I noticed he'd left behind his favorite tie, the one he wore when he wanted to look powerful. I held it for a second, then tossed it into the trash. It felt symbolic, even if small. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing his words over and over, "You'll never make it." Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., something inside me flipped. Maybe it was pride, maybe anger, maybe survival. But I remember whispering to the dark room, "Watch me." The next morning, I woke up, opened my laptop, and started writing the plan that would change my life. The one he swore would never work. I didn't know it then, but in less than a year, that plan would be sitting on the desk of the same man who told me I'd fail, attached to a $125 million contract. The morning after he left, the apartment felt hollow, like the walls had forgotten how to hold sound. Every corner carried a ghost of his voice, his scent, his judgment. For 2 days, I didn't move much. I kept telling myself I was just resting. But really, I was broken, numb in a way that made time stop meaning anything. It wasn't until I got an email from my landlord reminding me that rent was due that reality hit. I opened my bank account and saw $342.11 staring back at me. That number burned into my mind like a scar. He'd handled most of the bills, something I'd let happen without thinking twice. Because he was better with money. That was his line. Truth was, he just liked control. So I did what I hadn't done in months. I started taking control back. I made coffee, cheap instant coffee that tasted like cardboard, and sat down with my old notebook full of half-written plans. There it was, in messy handwriting from months before. Productivity software for small creative teams. A simple idea, born out of frustration. I'd shelved it because he told me, "That market's too crowded. You'll drown before you even start. But when you've already been thrown overboard, drowning doesn't scare you as much." I started working again, day and night. Tutorials, design drafts, cold emails to strangers on LinkedIn. I sent out so many messages I lost count. Most people ignored me. A few were kind enough to say, "Not interested." Still, every no pushed me harder. I got a part-time job at a cafe, just to keep the lights on. I'd wake up at 5, serve lattes to half-asleep commuters, and then come home to work on my app until midnight. I was exhausted, constantly questioning if any of it mattered. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd hear his voice in my head. That same line, "You'll never make it." It used to paralyze me. Then one night, I started saying it out loud, just to take the sting out of it, over and over until it lost its power. A few months in, I got my first tiny break. A small design studio in Austin wanted to beta test the app. They paid me $500, not much, but I cried when that PayPal notification came through. It wasn't about the money, it was proof. That small studio told another one, and then another. Word started spreading, slow but steady. I'd get these random messages from people saying, "Hey, your tool actually made my team's life easier." I screenshotted everyone. 6 months after he left, I didn't just have an idea. I had a company. A rough, scrappy, duct-taped together company, but mine. And then one morning, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in almost a year, his company's, a request for a demo. They didn't know it was me behind it. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my hands shaking. He once told me I'd never make it. Now his firm wanted to buy what I built. I almost didn't accept the meeting. Part of me wanted to delete the email and move on, pretend it never happened. But another part, the louder one, whispered, "This is what you worked for." The email was short and formal. "We're interested in exploring a possible collaboration with your company regarding your team productivity platform. Let us know if you're open to a pitch meeting." The sender's name wasn't his, but the company was his, the one he'd built up like a temple to his own ego. I read it a dozen times, imagining his face when he realized who was on the other end. So I said yes. The next week was a blur of preparation. I reworked my slides until 3 a.m., rehearsed my pitch in front of my reflection, and fixed every detail that used to make me second-guess myself. I remembered every time he'd interrupted me mid-sentence saying, "You ramble too much," or "You're not confident enough." This time, I made sure my voice carried. The meeting was set for a Thursday morning in a downtown high-rise, one of those glass towers that make you feel small before you even walk in. My hands were shaking when I pressed the elevator button, but I told myself, "You belong here now." Inside the conference room, there were 5 people waiting. Suits, laptops open, polite smiles. His company logo gleamed on the wall behind them. I introduced myself, started my presentation, and within 2 minutes, something in the air shifted. They weren't politely nodding anymore. They were actually listening. I talked about how most team software focused on data, not people, how mine was built around human workflow, emotion, and trust. I told stories about small teams using it to rebuild after burnout. I spoke from experience, not theory, and they could feel that. Halfway through, the door opened. I didn't even need to look up to know it was him. His footsteps sounded the same. Slow, deliberate, always making sure everyone knew he'd entered the room. "Sorry I'm late," he said. Then his voice faltered for a split second. "Sam?" I smiled, just enough to sting. "Good to see you again, Ethan." I was just finishing up. You could feel the tension crackle. He sat down quietly, flipping through the printed slides like he was trying to catch up. I kept going, calm and clear, even though my heart was pounding in my throat. When it ended, there was silence. Then one of his colleagues said, "This is impressive. We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition." Ethan looked at me, his jaw tight. I could see the realization in his eyes that the thing he'd mocked me for was now sitting on his company's table as a $1 million opportunity. I thanked them, packed up my laptop, and walked out before anyone could see my hands trembling. In the elevator down, I exhaled so hard it felt like I was finally breathing for the first time in a year. Later that night, I got an email. "Pending board approval, we'd like to move forward with a $125 million acquisition offer." I stared at the number for a long time. Then I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, where pain finally turns into power. The deal wasn't final yet. It was just pending board approval, which meant one more meeting. A big one. The kind where handshakes turn into headlines. I didn't sleep the night before. I kept pacing my apartment, rehearsing every answer I might need to give. Somewhere in between my nerves and excitement, it hit me. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I was scared of what it would mean if I actually won. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at their headquarters. Same glass tower, same intimidating view of the city. Only this time, I didn't feel small. I walked in wearing the same heels I'd worn the night he left me. The same ones he said made me look like I was trying too hard. They clicked against the marble floor like punctuation marks. When I stepped into the boardroom, he was already there. He stood when he saw me, trying to hide that flicker of surprise. He'd aged a bit, new lines around his mouth, less certainty in his posture. It was subtle, but I noticed. "But, Sam," he said, trying to sound casual, "you look good." I smiled. "Better than the last time you saw me, I'd hope." The rest of the team laughed lightly, breaking the tension. The CEO introduced me as the founder of the company they were about to acquire. My company. I shook hands, exchanged polite nods, and took my seat at the head of the table, directly across from Ethan. The presentation began. My CFO, a brilliant woman I'd met at a startup incubator, walked through the financials. I explained our vision for scaling, our user growth, our integration model. The board members nodded, asked thoughtful questions. Ethan said almost nothing. He just watched me, his eyes flicking between the slides and my face. At one point, the CEO asked, "So, how did you come up with this idea?" I looked right at Ethan when I answered. "It started when someone told me I'd never make it on my own." A quiet murmur rippled around the table. Ethan shifted in his chair, pretending to check his notes. I didn't look away. I didn't need to say his name. Everyone could feel the weight of that sentence. After the meeting, the CEO stood, shook my hand, and said, "Congratulations, Sam. The board's approved. We'll have the contract on your desk first thing tomorrow." I nodded, managing to stay composed until I stepped into the hallway. Then I finally exhaled. Ethan caught up with me by the elevators. "You did well in there," he said, his voice low. "Thanks," I replied. He hesitated, then added, "I didn't know it was you when the proposal came through." "I know," I said. "You never really did look close enough at what I was capable of." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The elevator doors opened, and as I stepped inside, he said, "I always believed in your ideas, you know." I turned back and looked him in the eyes. "No, Ethan. You believed in control. There's a difference." The doors slid shut between us, smooth and final. That night, I opened a bottle of cheap champagne alone in my kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I toasted the silence and whispered to myself, "You made it." The next morning, the $125 million contract was sitting on my desk, with his company's logo at the top. When I walked into their office to sign the final papers, I could feel every eye on me. It wasn't nerves this time, it was awareness. They all knew what had happened, even if no one said it out loud. Ethan was there again, of course. He had to be. He was one of the senior partners now, though not the top dog he once made himself out to be. He looked sharp, as always. Perfect tie, perfect posture. But I noticed something new in his expression. It wasn't arrogance. It was discomfort. The table was lined with documents, folders, a few cups of untouched coffee. My attorney sat beside me, flipping through the pages, but I couldn't stop glancing at him. The man who told me I'd never make it was about to sign off on a deal that put me in charge of something his company needed desperately. It was almost poetic. "Let's begin," the CEO said, motioning toward the papers. "Sam, your company's valuation has been reviewed, and the board approved the full acquisition price." He said it so casually, $125 million, like he was talking about the weather. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "I've reviewed the terms. I'm ready to sign." As I reached for the pen, Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Before we proceed," he said, glancing at the CEO, "I just want to say, this is an impressive achievement. Sam built something special here." I turned to look at him, really look at him. He wasn't smiling this time. There was a tightness in his jaw, like each word was scraping its way out. "Thank you," I said softly. "You always told me I couldn't." A few of the executives shifted in their seats. No one said a word. I signed my name, stroke by stroke, across the page. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from power, real, earned power. Ethan reached for his copy, signed it, and slid it back toward me. His hand brushed the table. I noticed the faint tremor in his fingers. When it was over, the CEO stood, clapped his hands, and said, "Congratulations to everyone involved." Cameras flashed. A few polite handshakes followed. But I wasn't thinking about the cameras. I was thinking about that night a year ago, his voice echoing through my apartment, "You'll never make it." Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. As we left the boardroom, he walked beside me, silent at first. Then he said, "You proved me wrong." I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "I proved myself right." He nodded, like he wanted to say more, but didn't have the right words anymore. That was new for him, being speechless. When I stepped outside into the bright morning light, the city looked different. Not bigger, not smaller. Just mine. Every building, every sound, every breath felt earned. I thought about sending him a message later, something sharp, something that would sting the way his words once did. But then I realized he wasn't worth a single word more. I didn't need revenge. I had reality. And reality had finally, beautifully, come full circle. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My phone was already buzzing. News alerts, congratulatory messages, interview requests. I hadn't even had coffee yet. And somehow, my name was trending in the local business feed. I sat there at my kitchen table, still in an old hoodie, staring at the email my lawyer had just sent. Attached was the official PDF of the signed contract, $125 million. My company's logo beside theirs, my signature beside his. For a long time, I didn't move. I just kept scrolling through the pages. Legal terms, clauses, merger details, all those things that once felt like a foreign language. Now, they were the lines that changed my life. I should have been celebrating, I guess. Champagne, confetti, something dramatic. But all I felt was quiet. That deep, still kind of quiet that comes when you finally stop running. I made coffee and sat on the floor by the window, watching the city wake up. That same skyline I used to stare at from my apartment when everything felt impossible. Now it looked softer somehow, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. Around 8 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and there he was, Ethan. He looked unsure, almost small. He held a manila envelope in his hand. "I thought I should deliver this personally," he said. "It's the hard copy of the contract." I stepped aside and let him in. He glanced around, probably expecting chaos or clutter, but the place was clean, minimalist, calm. Nothing like the old apartment where we used to fight. He set the envelope on the counter. "You really did it," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. "I told you I would," I replied. He looked down at the floor. "You were right," he said quietly. "I didn't believe in you." I should have. There it was. The apology I used to dream about. The words I'd replayed in my head 100 different ways. But standing there, hearing them out loud, they didn't feel as satisfying as I thought they would. "I don't need you to be sorry," I said. "You were part of the lesson." "That's enough." He nodded slowly, like he knew there was nothing else to say. Before he left, he turned back one last time. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. When the door closed behind him, I sat down again and opened the envelope. I took the contract out. Thick paper, heavy ink, everything official and irreversible. I ran my finger over my signature and whispered, "This one's for me." Then I folded it neatly, placed it in my drawer, and went back to my laptop. Because if there's one thing I learned from all of it, success isn't the end. It's the start of a different kind of fight. And this time, it was one I'd face on my own terms. That night, after all the calls and congratulations had faded, I sat alone on my couch with my laptop open. The city lights flickered outside the window, reflections dancing across the glass like tiny ghosts of every sleepless night I'd ever had. My inbox was full. Investors, journalists, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanting to catch up. I skimmed through them, half smiling, half exhausted. Then, at the bottom of the screen, I saw his name again, Ethan. Just one unread email. The subject line said, "For what it's worth." I hovered over it, debating. Then I clicked. "Sam, I wanted to say congratulations. You deserve it. I mean that. I know I didn't treat you right. Not back then, not when you needed support. I was wrong. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I just couldn't stand that you saw something in yourself that I couldn't see in me anymore. Anyway, I'm proud of you. Really." For a long time, I just stared at the screen. It wasn't much, but it was more than I ever thought I'd get from him. I started typing a reply. "Thank you. I learned a lot from what happened between us. You were right about one thing. It took losing everything to finally find myself. I hope you're doing well." I reread it a few times, fingers hovering over send. But something in me stopped. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride either. It was peace. The kind that comes when you realize you don't need the last word anymore. I deleted the draft, closed the laptop. I went out onto the balcony and watched the traffic move below, each pair of headlights carving its own path through the night. Somewhere out there, he was probably doing the same, wondering if I'd reply. He didn't need to know that I'd thought about it, that I'd typed every word, that I'd forgiven him quietly, in a way that didn't need witnesses. That was the message I never sent. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my notebook, and wrote one line at the top of a clean page. What's next? Because that was the real ending. Not the revenge, not the contract, not even the apology. The real ending was the beginning of the life I built, not to prove him wrong anymore, but to keep proving myself right. And for the first time in years, that was enough. It's strange looking back now. 3 years doesn't sound like much, but it feels like another lifetime. The company has grown beyond anything I imagined. We're in 10 countries now, hundreds of employees. There are mornings when I still wake up expecting to open my laptop at that old kitchen table, staring at the skyline and wondering if anyone will ever believe in me. Then I remember, I don't need anyone to. I still live in the same apartment, though. Not because I have to. I could afford something 10 times bigger, but because it keeps me grounded. The walls here have seen the worst of me. The tears, the doubt, the long nights of wondering if I was wasting my life. They've also seen me rebuild from nothing. I like that kind of honesty in a place. People always want to talk about the deal. They love the number, the drama, the story of the ex who said I'd never make it. They ask if I've spoken to him since. The truth? Once or twice, briefly, at industry events. We nod, exchange polite smiles. There's no bitterness anymore. Just two people who lived through a story and came out different on the other side. He's remarried, I think. I saw a photo online once. Him, his wife, their baby. I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel satisfaction either. Just distance. Like watching an old movie I'd once memorized but no longer cared to finish. I've learned that success doesn't heal you. It just gives you better tools to understand your scars. The real healing came later in the quiet, when no one was watching. Sometimes, I still hear his voice. You'll never make it. But it doesn't sting anymore. It's more like a reminder of the fire that started everything. Every time I push through fear or doubt, I hear that line and think, you were wrong, but thank you for saying it. Last week I spoke at a university event. Afterward, a young woman came up to me, nervous, holding a notebook, and said, "Someone told me I'll never make it either." I smiled at her, the same way I wish someone had smiled at me back then. "Good," I said. "Then you've got something to prove. Just make sure it's to yourself." She laughed a little, and I saw that flicker, the one I used to have, that quiet, dangerous kind of determination. When I got home that night, I opened my old notebook again, the one that started it all. On the last page, I wrote, "You'll never make it," he said, and maybe I wouldn't have, if he hadn't said it. Then I closed it, slid it into a drawer, and turned off the light. The story was over, and I was finally living the one I'd written for myself.